Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Pages of Hackney Bookshop is delighted to welcome you all to Hackney for the launch of Florian Gadsby's memoir, By My Hands. As I'm sure you all know, Florian is a London-based, world-renowned ceramicist who has become a cultural phenomenon. You know, don't you? Most of you will have seen Florian documenting his craft online, where he has a social media following in the millions. We're thrilled, therefore, to be able to welcome you all to this much more intimate launch event for his book. Tonight, we'll discuss Florian's artistic awakening, his education in England, Ireland, and Japan, and the sheer discipline that's led him to become the cultural sensation he is today. Unfortunately, Florian wasn't able to bring his wheel along, but he has brought some other things that we'll be taking a look at. Please, we're very pleased tonight to have Debika here to discuss Florian's book with him. Debika is a writer and editor specialising in arts, culture, cities and social politics, as well as editor of Crafts magazine and head of editorial at the UK Craft Council and many other hats. At the end of the talk, Florian will be signing books, and books are available for sale at the back. And we'll be signing up here, I believe, but we'll manage the queue for you, so if you just look for our cues on that. So I'll hand over now to Debika and Florian, and thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the IRL Florian Gadsby experience. I think having looked at Florian's Instagram, I know people are very keen to ask him questions all the time, so I'm pleased to say that I'm not going to be the only one asking the questions today. I'm going to do it for a little bit, and then we're going to open it up to everyone else. So please do think of questions to ask. We've already got a very vocal member of the audience over there, so let's not just leave it to Chiro. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so introduce myself. I'm Debika. I edit Crafts magazine, which is the magazine published by the UK Crafts Council. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, and we're doing a special issue that's out next month, and it will feature a big interview with Florian, and we're doing a shoot with him tomorrow, and it will look hopefully very different to what you're used to seeing on his Instagram. Yeah. So please do go to the Crafts Council website, sign up, try and get your copy, and hope you enjoy it. So I have read Florian's book over the last few days, and I think what really struck me about it were a couple of things. I think, first of all, and I don't mean this to sound as a surprise, but it was engaging. Hugely engaging. And it shouldn't be a surprise because, you know, we've all seen your Instagram and you write really well, but, you know, mostly Instagram stars, you would expect something more akin to maybe a self-help book or something a bit more lifestyle-y, whereas yours is very different from that.
Well, good. I haven't really heard much of a response yet from anyone because it's only just out, so thank you.
Yes. And I guess the other thing that struck me as a print journalist is that I've spent my career kind of going from print to increasingly into the digital world, and you've done exactly the opposite, which is you started presenting your work digitally, and now you're going increasingly analog in the form of this hefty tome. And I think that makes sense as well as someone who's championing craft to go into the material world and make something that's tangible and physical.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think a good place to start is social media, since that seems to be, you know, something that has brought everyone here. Actually, something worth asking: how many of you? Actually, maybe better to ask: how many of you don't follow Florian
That's me.
on Instagram? One person.
Yes.
Okay, but I mean, I suppose you have your phone on you, so that doesn't need to last too long. So we were talking the other day about fame and social media. You were talking about the fact that you've got a line of merchandise coming out alongside an exhibition that you're doing, and we talked a bit about T-shirts with Shoji Hamada's face on it. So I guess the first question is that the future? Are there going to be T-shirts with Florian's
definitely.
Face?
No. No, I mean, merchandise is, you know, I try to keep the things I sell on my website relatively pure. I think the furthest I would stretch personally is maybe doing things like prints or, you know, things of, you know, my drawings, basically. 'Cause those are asked about a lot. But I'm doing something with YSP, Yorkshire Sculpture Park, in November, and they are doing an amazing line of, merch. So tote bags and aprons and tool rolls and print. I mean, it's amazing. So that's exciting. But I don't think, personally, you know, it'd be like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Your favorite artist suddenly starts, releasing hats and T-shirts. There's something a bit. It goes against sort of what you're trying to do in some cases, unless, of course, it's a really good collaboration. But
well, then I guess that's a good point to ask. What is it that you're trying to do? You've built this extraordinary social media following, and that's become as much in some ways part of your work as your pottery is. So what was the aim originally, and what has it become, and what do you kind of try to do with what you're doing?
Originally, it was just to show my mum and my friends what I was doing. I started my apprenticeship with Lisa Hammond in 2014, and I basically, I wasn't living at home, and I thought it'd be nice so I could, I'd just been to Ireland and studied with a bunch of friends I'd made who were also potters, so I thought it would be nice to keep it going and show them what I'm up to. And then it didn't very quickly, but I remember asking Lisa because I felt a bit strange. You share a lot of their secrets because, a potter in their studio, there's lots of things that they do that they don't share with the outside world. And I asked her, I asked, are you okay if I, post about how you pack kilns and how you make mugs and do all these things? And she was sort of at the beginning, she was like, fine, yeah, whatever. I don't think she initially thought that it would maybe amount to anything, but she thought my apprentice documenting his experience with me is no bad thing. And then maybe like a month later, I remember going in one morning and being like, Lisa, I've got 10,000 followers. And she was like, what? So, but she still, she didn't change her thoughts. She still let me continue doing it, which was actually very nice of her, because I don't think everyone would necessarily let their, the person they're teaching then pass on what they're learning to the rest of, that was the reason people, I think, started following me, because back in the day, this is 2014, there was, 100 million users on Instagram, which is nothing compared to what it, now it's like 1.2 billion or something. So, and there weren't many people actually showing their practice. There were lots of potters posting kind of final products and stuff, but there weren't many people showing process and talking about, what they liked and didn't like, or the fact that they had to clean the studio every morning. So I think for some people initially, it was sort of like a TV show that they could tune into because it was something regular. And it became, I quickly realized that posting regularly was kind of a very good way of keeping people engaged. And it was, it just sort of went mad. And it wasn't my intention at the beginning for it to be a means of selling or promoting myself. It was basically just a blog for myself and my friends and my family. So it's been very strange it becoming something more, because in many ways, I'm not a very, performative person. I don't really like putting my face out there. It's the reason my YouTube videos are it's my narration, but I don't show my face because it's how I feel comfortable. So it has been then strange entering a world where it's kind of mandatory that you are, you become a personality or someone of interest.
So what has kept you motivated to keep doing it? Obviously it's no longer just a personal blog.
Well, it's the fuel of my business. I haven't missed a day posting since 2014, which is a really terrible thing to admit. There's been like a few days where I haven't because of some technical difficulty, but when you see something is working and it's successful, why would you stop? And I guess it gets to a point where when that is sustaining your business, it's kind of scary, the idea of stopping. So I think where I am now, which is, it's not probably a nice thing to admit, I'm rather obsessive, but I've seen how it works and that it's successful. So, I would like to maybe stop one day or dial it back a bit, because it is a second job and it eats, I could make twice as many pots if I didn't have to do any social media. But at the same time, I wouldn't, if I didn't do social media, I wouldn't have written a book and you all wouldn't be here. So, it's good.
Yeah. Well, as you say, initially, it probably started as people getting this glimpse of Lisa's studio and your work. And now you've got, I think, 789,000 last I looked followers. What is it there are other people doing ceramics and showing people their work in their studio. What is it, do you think, that keeps people interested in what you do, apart from regularity and kind of the algorithms? And I refuse to believe it can just be that.
I started at a very good time, and there are lots of potters who have come up recently who have become wildly successful and far more than me with, without doing it for as long as I have. That's fine. Times have changed. I started at a time when it was genuinely a bit easier to gain followers, but also, I mean, I don't know. I don't think about this that often, but I guess I do. I share technique. I share my story. I think Maze Hill, especially when I was my apprentice with Lisa, it was a really intriguing thing for people to follow along with. And then I went to Japan for 6 months, and that was again. It was like the second movie. It was the sequel, right? So it gave people another reason to engage on a different level and experience with me kind of this journey to Japan and learn. I knew how to make pots, but going to Japan was learning pots in a completely different way. I think that was interesting for a lot of people. So I think it's for lots of reasons that people follow. YouTube, maybe tutorials, videos, things that are helpful, advice, techniques. I try to answer questions. It's hard, but I like to feel as if I'm a real human as opposed to a brand and as something that you can't really get an answer out of. And I think that's often, maybe that's kind of been the appeal, because people like knowing that you're talking to a person. They're not just sending their messages to some kind of weird abyss where you don't know if it's going to be answered or not. It's I'm going to read everything that gets sent my way, even if it's not very nice. But that's rare. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that. But how true to life is your Instagram feed? I mean, what are you leaving out? How much effort and work goes into kind of
faking
creating?
it?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily chronological always. Recently with the book, it's been way more kind of realistic. But there have been times, for instance, when I got back from Japan and I didn't have a studio, I spent almost 2 years trying to find a workshop. But I had to continue posting online to remain relevant, and I went back through my archive and I chose things that I could write about. And I think that's potentially those 2 years were when I became a bit more interested in writing, because the photography, I'd already done all the photography, but I had to focus on something else to make my content interesting, so I thought more about the words I was kind of putting into it. And I had almost 2 years of that, so it was, great practice for the book.
Well, I think you said at one point you were trying to max out the word count as well.
For a long time I was trying to write, like Instagram has 2,200 characters, and it was just, again, some obsessive thing where I have to write as many as it will allow me, otherwise, but...
Yeah, practice for this.
It's practice.
Do you feel that is part of your motivation to encourage other people to take up pottery or teach? Is there a kind of educational element to...
It wasn't initially, but with time, the nicest messages I get are from people who say, like, because of your video, I've stopped my day job or I've gone part-time and I've started to make pots. If I hear one person say that, it kind of makes the whole point of posting on social media worth it, because if something I've done, which for me is quite small, or just sharing something that's personal to me has managed to change someone's life, then incredible. And I think that's kind of become even more extreme with YouTube. I have people who have learned to make pots on those videos. I had somebody who was blind message me and say, thank you, thanks to your videos and the way you carefully narrate them, I've been able to finally learn how to center clay, which is a really mad thing to hear, but that makes it all worth it.
That's fascinating. I think, I can't remember whether it was in your book or when we were talking, you said that in your early days when you used to go to fairs, people sometimes used to tell you not to pursue pottery and discourage you.
Yeah, so when I was a student and I was going to kind of ceramic fairs around the country, or even when I was with Lisa in kind of the first year on the circuit with her doing kind of, the fairs around the country, there were lots of people who said, don't bother becoming a potter, there's no money in it, you're not going to be successful. Or the other thing they said was, you do it, but it's going to take you 20 years before you see any success or sell your pots consistently. And that wasn't a, sorry.
That, do you want to bring him up here?
Maybe. Do you want to let him come here? Yeah. But that was a really widely accepted opinion. People thought that back then it was in a time when ceramics was in decline, and it wasn't on the ramp up that it's been on for the last 10 years. It was, university courses were closing. And, those fairs can be quite scary because a lot of people don't necessarily make any money on them. It's a kind of a gamble. You don't know what the footfall's going to be. And I think people would get a bit, yeah. So that's, I heard a lot of that.
We'll try and keep focused. Yeah, I mean, you heard a lot of that.
Yeah.
And you said that at the time, well, you just mentioned at the time university courses were shutting, and that's not really got any better. I mean, what do you feel when people ask you now?
Mm-hmm.
And are you in a position to give advice on whether you should become a potter? Because your story is quite unique. It's not every potter who's going to have...
I don't think it's ever, I mean, for God's sake. We live in a time where I don't think it's ever been easier to, everywhere you go, there are handmade pots. Like every shop you go into, every museum, every, homeware shop.
He's gone.
Oh, he's gone, that's fine. There, there are handmade pots everywhere. So I don't think there have ever been as many opportunities to make money and to, make a living from it, which is great. Of course, that means there's more competition, but I think that doesn't really matter. There are enough places to all live and work in a way that works.
I think that leads nicely to talking about the kind of next area I wanted to talk to you about, which is education.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked extensively about this, and your entire book is in fact framed around your educational experiences, the teaching that you had, first of all in school and through your apprenticeships. Tell me about that a little bit in terms of what do you feel is the value of an education like yours that had craft embedded in it so deeply? Personally, but also in general, how do you feel about...
I mean, I wouldn't be a potter had I not gone to the Waldorf Steiner school I went to. Mm-hmm. I think for any child, I mean, I wish, do any of you know much about Waldorf Steiner education? So yes and no. So I mean, it's private, but essentially what they do for a lot of the years is craft is as important as things like English or maths or science, which means, in class 1, before we did any mathematics, the first thing we did was learn how to crochet, and we made little bags with, drawstrings, and then we went out and collected conkers, and we filled the bag with conkers, and then we used those to do addition and subtraction. And that kind of was in every single subject we did. So when we were learning, mathematics, we would do beautiful graphs and we would color them in with crayons. And it just, I think for me, it made me value it on a level compared to, the other things they were equal. And I think there's something to be said about learning about how objects are made, be it, we learned how to sew, we learned how to use sewing machines, we learned how clothes were made. We went to local farms and we would see we milked cows. We even had a gardening area in the school where we could garden, and we ploughed. The kids pulled the shears, through the ground, but we planted trees, and we would pick berries, and we would make food from what we had grown. And I think then, so you're learning where food comes from. You're learning where how clothes are made, and then we would do ceramics. So we're learning where pottery comes from. We would do woodwork. We make wooden spoons and furniture, so we know where furniture comes from. And then stained glass. Sculpting marble, metalwork. So I feel like as a child, you really learn about the world around you and where things come from, which I can't say that every child probably has that sort of education. But I feel like it does to some degree make you respect those objects more, and what you surround yourself with, you respect it. So I wish that every school could be like a Waldorf Steiner school. Is our dog escaping? Oh my God.
Sorry, I think my advice to let him come to you might have been the wrong one. We'll carry on.
Sorry about that. I wish that I don't wish that every school was a Waldorf Steiner school. I wish that every school system just incorporated crafts and art in a way like that. Because I feel like it's, I don't want every school to be private. I don't want everyone to go to private school, of course. I want it to be completely accessible and open to everybody.
And I mean, you touched on it, but you've made a career out of it, but what do you feel the value is of having that kind of crafted education in general, even if you don't pursue it as a career?
I feel like all my friends I went to school with know about the arts, and they care about the arts and craft a bit more than people who haven't. That might be a generalization, I don't know, but when you meet someone who's from a Steiner school and has had that kind of education, it's weird. But it's definitely, I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that knowingly, really.
Yeah, well, it doesn't exist. So
no,
it's
exactly.
hard to know, yeah. I mean, similarly, we don't really have that kind of education system at school, but as we already discussed, investment at university level is also diminishing. Courses are being cut, and I think could you talk a little about your experience at the time? You said you went to Stoke-on-Trent to try and study pottery.
So I mean, we went around the UK. My mum drove me to all the different universities, thank goodness. And I went to Stoke-on-Trent, which you would think would be the place where, anywhere in the UK, that's where ceramics is going to be taught. And this was in 2012 or 2011, 2012 maybe. And, there were 2 dusty wheels in the corner of the room there, and the pottery, I asked her, like, at that time, all I wanted to learn was I had a huge appetite just for skill. I just wanted to learn how to make teapots and plates and bowls. I didn't care about the aesthetics so much. I really wanted to be good at something, because up until that point in my life, I don't think I was good at a few things. I wasn't really very good at anything. So it was really nice to have something that I felt like I wanted to be good at. And I went into the university, and there were 2 dusty wheels, and I asked, is there a throwing tutor? And they said, there isn't, but we could probably find one who could come in maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I was just like, shit, that doesn't sound great. And then I think she ended up saying something along the lines of, yeah, we don't think Stoke's the right university for you. And we'd love to have you, but which if the place that's the center of UK ceramics says that to you, then what the hell is going on? So luckily, then I came across this place called Thomastown in Ireland, specifically the DCCOI Ceramic Skills and Design Training course, which I don't like to describe it like this, but I do. It's like the Hogwarts equivalent of pottery. It's sadly it's closed now and changing into a 3-year course as opposed to a 2-year course, but it will persist. And that's another course. It was free to attend. It was 2 years. They only allowed 12 students every 2 years. They paid you an allowance, which in Ireland covered all my rent. Only €200 a month in the rural tiny village I was living in. And that was all, European money. And it meant anyone in Europe could apply. They didn't ask your age when you applied, so you ended up with a really diverse mix of people. So, I lived with a Greek woman, there was someone from Slovenia, there were some English people, and then, Irish people. So it was this amazing mix of cultures and people coming to a course that was, all they cared about. So the first year, all they cared about was teaching you skill. They didn't care about your aesthetic, really. It was just to kind of impart knowledge into you. And then in the second year, they go, okay, now we know kind of that you're capable of making pots, what excites you. But they also provided you with everything. Well, there were 25 kilns for 12 students. There was, wood-fired kilns, salt, gas, electric, soda. So it was sort of, what it gave us was the opportunity to try. Because, if you think about pottery, it's sort of like fine art. Not every fine artist, not every painter uses the same material, right? There are people who specialize in oil paints or watercolors or acrylic. And pottery is the same thing. And often it takes trying everything to figure out what you really want to do. So the course gave us that opportunity to suss out what we loved. And in the second year, they pushed you in the direction you wanted to go.
Do you think, is it a unique place? I mean, are there other similar
So,
places?
Luckily, it was unique in the sense that it was free.
Yeah.
And at that time, university fees had just been introduced in the UK, so it was sort of, I felt very lucky to go there and not have to have this debt pinned to me. But it was quite, there was a lot of people. There was something like 200 applicants. There was aptitude tests and interview. So yeah.
Yeah. I wonder do you hear from a lot of aspiring potters who are looking...
Oh, sorry. There is somewhere. Clay College in Stoke-on-Trent, which Lisa Hammond set up.
Right.
It's sort of built on the same model. There's a fee, but it's you still get contact hours every day. It's 44 weeks a year. It's 9 till 5. It's like a job, and all the people who have gone and done that course and graduated have come out with an incredible amount. When I went to Thomastown for the first time to kind of look at it, I remember going into the showroom, which they have before you go into the school, and I was kind of dumbfounded that this was the work of students. It was at such a high level, and I thought, like, Christ, if this is what they're learning here, I have to go here. And I have the same feeling with the students that are coming out of Clay College in Stoke-on-Trent. The level of skill they have is incredible. It's professional, it's interesting. because they're not just being pushed to make, pots that are technically good, they also care about you as an artist and an individual. So they help push your work to a point where it's going to, be unique and sellable. So, yeah.
How many students do they take in?
14 every 2 years.
I mean, it's not large if that's the kind of
No,
exemplar of
it should be bigger, but hopefully it gets to a point where our education system and universities take it more seriously and go in that direction, because
we're veering into talking about style. So I thought maybe this is the point at which I ask you of what your favorite pots are, and you whip out some pots.
So this is to maybe, we were going to do some throwing, but it's complicated. So what I've done, I mean, I've brought some pots along which I think are really important to me. And I'll leave here and you can come and have a look at them after. There's just 3 things, and I think they kind of tell an interesting story, each of them. So let me just grab them. I have to really try and not drop them because it's a bit scary. Oh yeah, good idea. I'll leave this here. So when we're signing and things, please, come and have a look. I thought it'd be nice to have something physical just to show you guys, what the, it's at the back. I feel so, you afterwards. So I mean, this is the mug that first. I glazed it and fired it, and I cleaned up the bottom in such a way that I thought, holy shit, that's something that looks professional, like a real potter made it. And, I was probably 16 or 17 at the time, and it was the first piece, that made me kind of consider that this is something I should do for my career. In school, I played a lot of video games. I didn't really have a direction that I wanted to go in necessarily. And I think because I was playing lots of games on screens, I was quite obsessed with things like Photoshop and Illustrator, and I was doing a lot of graphic design, and I didn't know what I wanted to do necessarily. And then one day, and I'd been making pots at this point, my metalwork teacher, pottery teacher, and fine art teacher said, let's meet in the forge downstairs, the metalwork room, in the basement. And I went in and they all said, Florian, we think you should probably do ceramics. You shouldn't pursue fine art. And I was really angry at first because obviously, people telling you what you think you like, that you shouldn't do it. It's a bit of like a, punch to the gut. But then I thought, well, if 3 people who are professionals at what they do and they're all very good at what they do have that same shared opinion, then probably it's what I should do. So that's that piece. And then we can move on. I mean, this is a pot you will never see me make ever again. It's a chawan tea bowl with my crackle glaze that's kind of wonky and cut and a bit ragged. During my last year at Thomastown in Ireland, Lisa came for a weekend workshop, and it was to learn how to make. It was to learn about her and her process and her career. But then she also took us for kind of a masterclass to make these, and it was that weekend that I sort of figured out that I would be her apprentice. So this part kind of for me marks the beginning of that relationship, which kind of sparked everything, I guess. I don't know about you, but there are some pots that are far more sentimental than others. And this, telling my student self this, I wouldn't think about that. I don't think I would care. I didn't really understand what pots could mean. Nowadays, there are pots which I thought about passing these around, and I want you guys to hold them, but also, if I dropped this or if someone dropped it, I would cry. So that's the reason they're going to say, I mean, there are some of these I don't want to hold, really. So these are, they're in the book as well. You'll see them. And then this one, this is probably the most precious thing I own. It's a Yohen Yonomi by Ken Matsuzaki. On my first day in Mashiko, when I went there, Lisa helped organize this 6-month apprenticeship, which I think was the best. When I did, talking about social media kind of periods that I felt were engaging, this was it was so fun creating content for that. Anyway, on the first day there, after sweeping leaves for like 4 hours in the morning and grinding glaze off the bottom of a plate, we went up to have tea, which we did every day at 3 o'clock. And he said, this will be the cup you use while you're here. And I didn't, think anything of it. So every day, this is what I drank green tea out of. And often those moments were kind of quite quiet and thoughtful. Ken and Doi wouldn't really talk. We would just like drink tea in silence, have a few snacks. And all I could do was kind of hold this cup and look into it and drink my tea. And then on the final day there, he gave me another cup to drink green tea out of, and I was like, what's going on? And then he gave me this one wrapped up. So this marks, Japan. This is that journey. This is kind of, I see that period of my life as like the end of my ceramics education, almost. In a way, it started in Steiner, and then it went to Thomastown, Ireland. No, sorry, that is Ireland. Steiner, Ireland, back to with Lisa in Greenwich, and then Japan. So that's I kind of look at that whole period as my ceramic education, and this is kind of the final, step. So I don't even dare use it really these days. I would love to use it, but do you know what I mean? I don't trust myself, because I know if it broke, I would, because I could probably buy a similar one again, but it's not the one. Anyway, that's pots.
Please be careful when you come near.
Yeah, please do look at I'm going to leave them on the table or on a table. You're welcome to have a look. I don't need to tell you to be careful. You will, after hearing that.
I think we started about 15 minutes late, so I'm just going to keep going for another 15
Okay.
minutes. So we'll end 15 minutes later. Is that okay? So Japan.
Yes.
Maybe this is a good point to talk about that. So what influence did that Japanese education have on your work, and what lingers?
It's a really interesting question, because I don't know if I really know. I think a lot of people expected me to go to Japan and kind of come back making Japanese pots, and kind of, when people go traveling and they come back and they've changed, right? I think people expected me to go there and sort of really embrace their sort of tableware and come out of it a changed potter. I think more what I got out of it is sort of understanding how hard they work, and their respect for materials and where they live, and their, the studio. I've never worked with two people who work harder than Doi and Ken. We did, 80-hour weeks, Monday to Saturday every week, and then I would finish at 5:30, go home for dinner, and then we would come back to the studio from 7:30 until about 10 or 11 every day. To some degree, I do think that's working too hard, but I also get the impression that they are just so dedicated and they love what they're doing so much, and they are willing to kind of, Doi's life was sort of monastic. He's done a 10-year apprenticeship there. He's now going to be there for even longer, which is... Is it
still an apprenticeship if you've done it for 10 years?
I don't know. I hope not. I hope he gets promoted. Doi, when you read the book, Japan is I think my favorite section, and Doi, he was this... He still is. He was Ken's apprentice. So I think when I was there, he had been there for 7 years, which is a long time. And then the last I heard, he was going to be there for 10 years, but now I know that period's up. So I did actually hear from Lisa recently that he might be there for another 10 years, which sort of terrified me. But the thing is, if Doi, having done that apprenticeship, will never have to worry about being successful, because he will be successful because of the lineage he's worked for. Do you know what I mean? So Ken came from Shimoka, who came from Soji Hamada, and then Doi worked for Ken for maybe 20 years. His career will be set in stone. So I don't know if it's sort of an investment for him. He's doing it in a way, also he's learning it, in a crazy amount.
Do you think he's still learning more than 10 years in the same place?
That's a good question. It's interesting because the main apprentice there doesn't really make pots. Whereas when I worked with Lisa, one of the main, as an apprentice, our job is to make the clay, clean the studio, all of that kind of stuff. But also, a huge amount of our time is dedicated to producing what was the house range, so mugs, cups, bowls, beer cups. So I learned... Lisa was an amazing opportunity, because I was able to hone my skills without really any financial worry. I didn't have to worry about actually running a business. I was just given, access to throwing as much as I could for her, and very good tuition, without really having to worry. I know for Ken that his apprentices don't really help with the production in the same way, but also they learn in maybe a different way. They observe and they learn and they understand and they know what they're doing. And that's what Lisa used to always say, because Lisa's had a few apprentices who have worked as potters in Japan and then have come to work with her. And she says they know exactly, You know, if she needed a towel, it would already be there. You know, if she needed a certain tool, it would already be there. And I do think, you know, to some degree they're on it, they know what they're doing. And I think it wouldn't take him long. Say if his skills were lacking because he hadn't made much, he would get to the point where they're amazing very quickly.
Yeah. So there's learning that kind of whole process, but in what way do you think the influence of the style that you saw pots being made has seeped into your work?
I mean, I don't think my pots look particularly Japanese. No. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
And I don't want, you know, I love Japanese ceramics so much, but I don't want to be replicating it. Care, attention, you know, pouring your heart into every object they make. But I don't think there's anything, if you look at my work, there's nothing obviously that stands out as being Japanese. Some of you might have a different opinion, and I would love to hear it. But I try these days not to, you know, look at pots, especially, you know, I don't want to make pots that I don't, I mean, this leads to another question, I guess. I don't want to make pots that I don't necessarily understand and aren't part of me or my history or my culture or the way I grew up.
Yeah.
I want to make pots that I know generally.
Yeah, and that's something you do touch on in the book a little bit, this idea of, you know, people taking influence from pottery traditions or craft traditions that they don't necessarily have a history or knowledge of. I mean, what can you expand on what you say in the book? I mean, basically, it's what I was talking about it earlier. So in one of my final, in the winter in Japan, Ken flew to Chile, basically to escape the cold, which is very clever. And he left me his studio, his guest studio, to make pots for a month. So I set about, basically, I thought it would be more interesting if I create the work that I was making in Ireland when we were given that year to kind of define our style. It'd be more interesting if I was creating those pieces, but with Japanese materials. And as I was posting about it online, I ended up getting tons of comments from people going like, why are you not making, you know, teaware? Why are you not making sake cups and guinomi and mizusashi and all these things? So I think a lot of people maybe, like I said, they expect me to go over there and have some sort of revelation. But those aren't pots that I grew up with here. I don't really understand. I mean, I've done the tea ceremony. I don't necessarily understand, you know, it's not part of my self. So I think these days I just have a slight uncomfortable feeling that creating work like that doesn't sit well with me. And it is a really grey area. I don't think it's necessarily, you know, you can't gatekeep a shape necessarily, but I think there is some thing you have to be careful about or ask yourself why you're making something. So I just feel a bit strange about, you know, creating certain things. And that's why, you know, things like that, I'm never going to make another tea bowl in my life. In Japan, I did end up making some, but only because Ken asked me to. He came into the studio one day and he said, Florian, I really want you to make some chawan and yunomi for the kiln and for the shino firing I was going to do. And I was a little bit apprehensive. And then he said, I'm going to sit with you while you throw them. So it ended up being a very nice and pleasant kind of cultural exchange where he was giving me, you know, he showed me how to throw loads of different shapes and he told me why. And then he trimmed their feet and he told me, you know, this is why they trim feet, so they have this angle and, you know, that because it looks like a bamboo node, or this is why they trim it the other way because it looks like this. And then that evolved then onto the glazing, which, you know, I don't know if any of you know kind of shino tea bowls. They're kind of quite earthy and metallic and pink and purple or brown or white. They are very organic. And I struggled with that. The way I glaze things is very simple and minimal, and I tend to have kind of uniform glazes that coat the whole pieces. And he gave me homework over the winter holidays to come up with ways of decorating pots in an interesting, you know, way. And I found it so hard because when you have shino pots look, I think, nicest, in my opinion, when they look organic because the shapes are thrown intentionally wobbly and irregular. So the glazing sort of has to match that. Otherwise, you've got two kind of conflicting aesthetics going on. But then he just sat with me and he talked about the glazing and he said, you know, I let each pot dictate how I glaze it. I don't think about it beforehand so much. I just look at the shape on it and I decide, you know, if there's a ledge here, I'm going to glaze the portion underneath it so it looks like it's casting a shadow. And he would just, that's how the whole thing went. So whilst I'll never make these again, as an experience, it was, incredibly special. And I was, I think, very lucky to get that. So how would you describe your own style then?
I hate this question. It's like when people ask you what your influences are.
That's the next one.
Is it? Oh, it's changed a lot. I think if you would ask myself maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would want it to be very, very functional. I think nowadays I don't mind that some of the forms are leaning into kind of more sculptural or decorative pieces, despite them still being a mug or a bowl. I've always loved making pots that are very light and delicate and have, thin and fine edges, but inherently those aren't very functional because they're easy to chip. But you can look after pots you use that are like that just a bit more carefully. But otherwise, it's minimal, it's simple, it's sleek. I try to create the objects that I can imagine myself living with and using. And I say that, and that's actually a lie, because I use pots that, some of the pots that I like using the most are made by Jean-Nicolas Girard, who's a French potter who takes a bit of earthenware, throws a cup, squashes it with his hand, and then just glazes it with random colors. But I love using that. Yeah. But it's an interesting question. I sometimes feel like it's easier for other people to describe your style than the potter themselves.
But are you ever tempted to break out of the kind of minimalism and the restrained approach that you take to your pots?
I might have a midlife crisis, and then yes. No, there are days where I feel like, God, all I want to do is just throw some, pots with strong throwing rings and leave it very rough, leave them, chunky but.
I don't know if the element of surprise works well with the Instagram.
No, and it's an interesting conversation, because at the same time, you don't want to feel like you're trapped in making a certain style. But, when your favorite rock band suddenly makes an album that's pop, you are sometimes a bit like, oh, God, no. So I feel that there is a bit of pressure on me to maybe, keep maintaining a certain style. And I don't mind that to some degree. I can branch out and experiment, and I try and introduce it slowly. But as the years have gone on, all I've wanted to do is actually double down on the style of pots I make and make them, because it takes a long time when you're learning ceramics to kind of develop your voice, right? Your specific style that you feel is truly yours. It takes ages. I've probably gone like 10 years getting to a point where I feel like something is truly mine. And now that I'm there, I can identify the points which make a pot a Florian Gadsby pot, and I want to double down on those and make them even more Florian Gadsby pots.
So apart from unless you have a midlife crisis, there's not going to be a massive change in style in the offing.
Unless you work under another moniker and you don't tell people.
Second Instagram.
Which I do know people, someone who does that. So.
And not you. Okay. Well, everyone look out for another Instagram account somewhere which could have maybe not be Florian's. I'm not going to ask you your favorite influences, but I can't guarantee that nobody else in the room will. But I think this is a good time to turn to all of you and ask you your questions. And I think there's a mic somewhere around the room, but I'm not sure.
Is there a roaming mic?
I thought there might be.
Or you have to shout.
Or you just shout out and tell us who you
yes.
are. Yes, please. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, tell us who you are and then go ahead.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. How I identify myself as a craftsperson, or if you Google me, it says I'm a YouTuber. And that's really annoying, because about 4 months ago, you get these things called knowledge panels, right? And you can submit basically the consensus of what the internet thinks you are. They put a title under your name, and it said YouTuber. So I submitted a thing saying, actually, I think I'm a ceramicist. And then it was like that from like 2 months, and then now it's changed back. So I think YouTube is maybe like that supersedes everything. But no, I think about this a bit in terms of how I identify as an artist. I don't care. I try not to think about a potter, ceramicist, or artist. There's a lot of conflicting arguments about, what's right, what's wrong. But I would prefer to be that than a YouTuber or a social. It's difficult, I mean, so much of my life exists in this kind of online world. I get it that people refer to me as an influencer or a social media person, but it's not what got me into pottery. if I had to choose between potter and ceramicist and artist, now I would probably go artist because of, I'm taking photos, I'm writing, I make video, I've written a book. I don't know. So I actually almost don't care. And I don't think you should let it define you, really, because it's up to you to decide, not, other people, really. I mean, the thing is, I get the argument from a potter's perspective, because there are people who make pots and they don't consider themselves artists. They could, they consider themselves potters. So, but arguably, all of my pots are wheel thrown. They're all based on thrown forms, which are pots. And I don't know. I think there are lots of blurred lines, and it gets to a point where it's just tricky. And I don't know. I just don't care anymore, is the answer. I've had this conversation a lot with a lot of people, and it's one of those things. So, I mean, I've only been running my business, and I've only had a studio of my own since 2019. So in some ways, I feel like I need more life experience before I take someone under my wing and teach them. I also think that perhaps now is not the right moment, because I would probably be telling them to be quiet for most of the day. I film so much that I would have my camera rolling, and if the radio's playing or they're talking to me, that could be annoying. In a way, kind of my educational content at the moment is focused on the videos I create, and it's nice in a way because that can, anybody in the world can watch them for free. It's not the same, obviously. So I would eventually like to. I have this grand studio in my head. I know how it's laid out. I know where the kiln is. I know where my wheel is. I would love to have a space that's kind of. I've got my studio, and then there's kind of units. Not horrible kind of tiny units, but rooms that then apprentices can work in. Because that's how I was taught, and I would like to pass on skills in the same way. And actually, thinking back to Maze Hill, when I worked with Lisa, I spent so much time hanging out with Darren Ellis. I don't know if you know Darren Ellis. He's another potter who was one of Lisa's previous apprentices, and often he teaches evening classes there still and is there quite a lot. The most fun I had during my apprenticeship was kind of talking to Darren, because we've both had this shared experience of, not like being an apprentice is like going, being in the war or anything, but you've both gone through the hardship of learning a skill under a teacher. Teachers always have their own particular ways of demonstrating and showing you how to do things, even when they might not necessarily always be right or the fastest way, but you have to do it, right? So yeah, I can't think back on my time with Darren or even Doi in Japan, even though we couldn't really communicate very easily. We did come to a kind of this point where we understood each other on a strange level, and it was really fun. And Lisa has a lot of fun with it's really nice having someone in the studio you can bounce ideas off, who can help you pack the kiln and do the glazes and mop the floor. So in the future.
Another question here.
No, so that course was running, that charity ran for a long time before I met Lisa, and Clay College has sort of not superseded that. I think Adopt a Potter is still running. Lisa, because it was her charity, did not fund her apprentices through the charity. She did it from her own pocket. But, an amazing thing, if you can make it work. It can be quite tricky to, because, it's a very intimate relationship. I was probably with Lisa more than, I spent more time with her during the day and the week than she did with her partner at home. And I made lunch for her every day. You listen to the radio, you talk, and you fire the kiln late into the night. You end up having quite a interesting, friendship. But yeah, yes, I think you have to go and find someone who you can do it with, and the potter, you've got to find someone you get along with. That's the most important thing. And then you both together go back to the charity and go, this is, will you do it? But if you can do it, do it.
Any more questions?
Yes, hi. Back in the day, there were a number of potters who started selling online, like I did, in drops, which is a nice way of operating because it, as a potter, you're already doing so much, and if you're on social media already, you're spending a portion of your day filming, photographing, and to promote yourself, if then your shop on your website is open all year round, you're constantly then having just to shift between making pots, photography, and shipping. It's quite a stressful dynamic. So the way it's nice because you segment your year and you do a shop update 3 times a year. That's quite nice. But I don't think there's any. I mean, people buy anything online these days, right? And I think the pandemic maybe accelerated that. But I wouldn't have any. If that's something you're thinking about, I just would go for it. Because if people are following you, they're following you for a reason. And if you're enthusiastic about the work you're selling and you're happy about it, then I'm sure people will be positive and will buy things. Yes. Hello. Hi. So my number one arch nemesis, John O'Smart, I've met loads of people. I mean, it's amazing. So John O'Smart was a potter who kind of started posting at a similar time that I did, and since then I have like an agony aunt group with him and another person called Woodwoven, Alex Duvall, if any of you know him. And for years, we would just ping questions off each other, and it's so nice having someone you can just ask the silliest thing that you don't know or understand. It's so helpful. So that's great. And then nowadays it's just there are so many potters who come and visit you. I recently had not work related. She came to my studio, and she's someone I followed online for a while, and I know her work, and it's because you kind of build relationships with these people. You might follow them for years. You've never met them, of course. You don't actually know them. You don't know what their personality's like, but you've seen them post every single day, and they talk about the things they like. So yeah, meeting those people is really interesting, and sometimes you bond in a second. So there's probably loads more. I mean, you end up meeting the most random people through social media. So yeah.
I really like this idea of the secret society of craft influencers hanging out in the real world offline.
Well, I mean, it's hard running a business by yourself.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There are loads of things I don't understand, and for instance, Jono did a lot. I've asked him for help about money. How to manage a business. How does he do it? And he has some really good advice that I feel comfortable asking him about. I'm sure loads of craftspeople do it these days. I mean, that's one very positive thing about social media, I guess. I mean, there are negatives about it, but there's also lots of wonderful things.
Yeah, connections to be made.
Yeah, exactly.
More questions, please. We've got a few more minutes.
Anybody else? Prior to the book, I did a year of really quite intense glaze testing, and I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiles. The thing is, glaze testing eats massively into other things like producing the work I need to sell in order to sustain my business. Glaze testing kind of can eat into that. So I did a huge amount prior to the book, then the book came along, and I sort of had to decide, well, I'm either going to have to keep making pots and sell them to keep my business going, because the book obviously ate into that time. So I would like to do a lot more. I've done, some iron. I mean, mainly I just whack iron on pots and refire them and hope for the best. And some of those are actually really pretty. And I don't have control over it, which is the nice thing. They're different. Hi there.
As a follow-up question, because I really love the drawings.
Yes.
Like, what percentage of the pots are drawn out in advance?
The good thing about drawing is you can try out, 30 ideas in the time it takes to throw 2. And sometimes, in the studio, I've got this just stack of sketches and paper. It's covered in clay. And if I'm sometimes struggling with ideas, I just go back to it as a reference, and I'll go like, crap, bad idea. That looks interesting. And especially then for Yorkshire Sculpture Park, this exhibition I'm having, I wanted, obviously because the work I sell on my website tends to be the same again. And if I have an exhibition, I don't just want to sell the same work through a gallery, right? How do I figure that out price-wise? Because I can't sell my mugs for the same price as the ones on my website, because the gallery has to take 50%. Do you know what I mean? So for that show, it was really helpful because I could go through all of these pictures and find things that were a bit more unique and just adapt. But yeah, I definitely don't draw as much as people probably think. There was a period when I got back from Japan and I didn't have a studio where it's all I did. Every day I would, sit and draw. Not all the time, but it was really useful.
Any more?
Any more questions? Yes. My time. I work all the time, as Daria can attest to. Sometimes it's hard, right? Because the way I look at it, I'm the engine to keep the business running. So things like social media, I have a constant. If I stop posting, maybe I become irrelevant. So I have this. I know that's probably not the case, but I think that pushes me to be constantly on top of that. But you just have. It's hard. I don't think but I haven't sorted it out. Is the answer. But in some ways, I have done things like I know that on Fridays I'll be spending the day, instead of potting, I'll be taking photos and filming, or doing my narration to my YouTube. So I've tried to do that to stop that eating into my weekends. That doesn't always work. I wish it did, but it's hard when you're self-employed. I mean, how many of you are potters and do this for a living, or are self-employed? Well, you probably all know what it's like. You probably end up working more than you should, but you are self-sustaining your business, and there's no one else who's going to, pick up the pieces if you don't work. So it's hard. That's the boring answer.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes.
No. Can we come back to your studio after this? Is the question.
Is that where the after party is? I could potentially do a day. Yeah, why not? Get in touch and ask. We'll see what we can do. I can't do October. October's the month from hell, but September maybe.
I feel like this is something I've always wanted to start with, open studios around London. We should
I
start
think it'd be
with
fun.
you and yeah.
As long as not everyone, I can only handle like 3 people at a time in there maybe, so Chiro might bark at you.
Form a queue. Time is almost up, and
Yes.
you'll be signing books, so there'll be more opportunity for people to have
Yes.
brief chats after this. And I mean, I could keep going through my questions, but there really isn't time, so let's maybe stop there. And I encourage you all to, if you don't already have a copy of the book, please do get it. It's really a great read, and I think Florian has clearly got talent in writing just as much as pottery and social media and all the other things that he does.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Florian.
Thank you.